My name is Sarah Elizabeth, and I'm in Group 6, and I will be going over pages 297 to 299 of the Islam section of the textbook. This will be covering first an introduction to the 5 pillars of Islam, as well as an in-depth look at the first and the second pillars. So starting with the introduction, the 5 pillars of Islam. Islam is built on 5 pillars that were established by Muhammad, who is the main prophet or messenger of Islam. And he said, and these are the foundation of the faith for absolutely any Muslim. He said that the first is to declare, which is also known as bearing witness, to the fact that God is the only God and that Muhammad is his messenger or prophet here on earth. The second is establishing regular worship, which we'll also look into. The third is paying alms, which are known as zakat. The fourth is observing the feast of Ramadan. And the fifth is performing the Hajj pilgrimage at least once in a Muslim's lifetime. Now, these 5 pillars are central to Muslims' faith, social responsibility, worship, and piety. So it all comes down to these 5. And the acts of worship are mandatory for all Muslims. So now we'll take a look at the first pillar. This is known as the Shahada. And within this one pillar, there are 2 main declarations. The first is affirming the oneness of God, saying that there is no other God besides God. And linked to this, within this first declaration still, is the belief that every Muslim, or every person really, is born in an original state of faith. Now, this is different than original sin in Christianity, but what an original state of faith means is that each child is almost like they're born with a blank slate, and it's up to the parents as they grow to determine and foster the religion and faith that they're a part of. But then also, as they get older, it becomes more upon that individual to decide how they will live out their faith, which faith they will choose, if they choose a faith at all, but it all comes down to that original state of faith. This second declaration is affirming Muhammad's role as the messenger or prophet of God, and knowing that his message is the truth and going by it. That's it for the first pillar, but moving on to the second pillar is about the 5 obligatory prayers that Muslims say every day. Now, these are said, can be said anywhere in the world. They don't have to be, they're said in their daily life. And the 5 times a day are at dawn, at noon, in mid-afternoon, at sunset, and after dark. Now, before Muslims pray, they always have a ritual washing, which they do. And this means basically just washing their hands, their face, their feet to make them more pure for prayer. Now, this act is known as wudu, which is translated to making pure or radiant. So 5 times a day, there is a man named whose title is a mudahidan, and he melodiously chants the call to prayer. Now, this call is broadcast on TV, on the radio, through loudspeakers, so Muslims around the world can hear it and tune in just about wherever they are. He repeats each call at least twice for emphasis to make sure that no one has forgotten or has missed something. And there's a way that these 5 calls to prayer are broken down. So within each call to prayer are multiple rakas, and these are little cycles of prayer or units that include bodily positions such as bowing, kneeling, and prostrating oneself. So within each of the 5 calls to prayer, there's a different number of rakas. And at the beginning of each rakas, the Fatiha is prayed. And this prayer is the beginning of the Quran, and it's very similar to Christianity's prayer called the Lord's Prayer. So basically, this prayer is repeated multiple times each day, well over 5, because sometimes there might be up to 5 cycles or units of prayer within each of the 5 calls to prayer. Now, for Muslims, there is no Sabbath. Instead, Friday is the day of congregational worship. And the word Juma means assembly. So this is their way of coming together as a congregation and praying. The place of worship that they go to is not called a church or a temple or anything along those lines. Instead, it has two different names. The first one is Masjid, which means place of prostration and prayer. And it's from this word that we derive the English phrase or word mosque. The other term that's important to know is the Hami, which means gatherer. And naturally, this makes sense because they're gathering together in prayer. Finally, however, Muslims don't only say congregational prayers on Fridays. Instead, they do it on days of major festivals and during their Hajj pilgrimage. And one important festival to note is called Eid al-Fitr, and this is the day of feasting at the end of Ramadan, which obviously is important because there's a lot of fasting during Ramadan, so I'm sure it's great to be feasting. Finally, the last thing to know about the second pillar is that faithful Muslims hold a very, very firm belief that everything, whether it's good or evil, is contingent upon God's will. And that is it for the introduction to Islam, as well as the first and second pillar. Thank you very much.